I'm gonna read from a book I'm currently interested in. It's called Interface Culture: How New Technology Transforms the Way We Create and Communicate by Stephen Johnson. I think I have a chapter right now. It's about Windows. If Windows don't harness the potential of our spatial memories, then what are they good for? In the early days of the graphic interface, as the computer world struggled to make sense of this new computing revolution, the usual explanations revolved around being able to see two documents at once. You could do a quick compare and contrast between two drafts of a text document, or finesse a few numbers in one window while a pie chart adjusts itself accordingly in another. That was a tantalizing prospect in its day, although a handful of command line applications already offered split screen features. For most users, though, the real benefit of the window comes not from being able to see two documents at the same time, but being able to switch back and forth between those documents with a single click of the mouse. The window turns out to be a way of visualizing what programmers call a mode switch. In an average day working at a computer, chances are you switch back and forth between dozens of different modes without thinking twice about it. Imagine a mode as being a rough appraisal of what your computer is doing at that very moment. The word mode has a precise technical definition, but for our purposes, we'll use the term in a broader sense. You have a mode for creating a new text document, a mode for editing an existing spreadsheet, a mode for rearranging a file directory, and a mode for changing your system preferences. In the old days of the command line, you had to initiate each of these modes by typing in an obscure sequence of letters. The line between each mode was clearly drawn. If you typed one sentence, you would enter into the directory-altering mode. If you typed another, you'd be allowed to tinker with your system preferences. This required prodigious feats of memorization, of course, and it was easy to lose track of which mode you were in. The whole system was hugely counterintuitive. It was as though each time you wanted to scratch out a note to someone on a piece of paper, you had to punch in a key combination to unlock your pen. What Delgar and Gilbert and the folks at Xerox PARC realized was that you could take these arcane command-driven modes and replace them with windows. The spatial properties of the window weren't a mnemonic device, a way of remembering where you'd put things. They were a way of representing modes, and more importantly, a way of switching back and forth between modes. The top-level window would represent the active mode. Edit the contents of this directory. While beside it, a non-active window tempted you with another mode. Change your system preferences. While beneath both of these windows another lurked, this one offering to edit a word processor document. You could shuttle back and forth between modes effortlessly by clicking on the appropriate window. The illusion was so successful, in fact, that the whole idea of modes has dropped out of mainstream computer parlance to be replaced by windows. That shift from modes to windows was a massive advance in ease of use, so massive, in fact, that it is now difficult to imagine a digital world without windows. Creative transformations of this magnitude tend to have secondary effects on those of us living under their spell, particularly when the conventions are so familiar, so second nature, that they become transparent to us. Think about the way those memory palaces shaped the structure of Dante's Inferno. For cyber philosophers like Sherry Turkle, the windowed imagination is emblematic for our larger postmodern condition. The unified field of traditional post-enlightenment thinking fractured out into 100 different points of view, each of them equally valid. The passage from the fixed system of the command line to the more archaic possibilities of the window follows the same route traveled by Western philosophy, from the stable, unified truth of Kant and Descartes to the relativism and ambiguity of Nietzsche and Deleuze. The window for Turkle is a way of thinking in multiplicities. as all good postmodernists are supposed to do. Multiple viewpoints, Turkle writes, call forth a new moral discourse. The culture of assimilation may help us achieve a vision of multiple but integrated identity whose flexibility, resilience, and capacity for joy comes from having access to our many selves. It is easy to imagine the potential objections to this line of logic. For high-tech skeptics, such as Sven Habakkuk's, the window is less a matter of multiple selves and more a matter of attention deficit disorder. Yet another sign of a culture's resistance to the slow, contemplative pace of traditional novel. An aesthete like Burckhardt, trained to celebrate poetic ambiguity, wouldn't object to the basic the philosophical premise of Turkle's argument. It is the digital means to that conceptual end that he would have a problem with. Surely we don't need so many modes buzzing simultaneously in every corner of our computer screens to appreciate the insights of relativist philosophy. Nietzsche, after all, did pretty well with the linear print-on-paper technologies of his day. More conservative cultural critics like the late Alan Bloom and Dinesh D'Souza would simply reject the suspicious continental idea of multiple truths or perspectivism. They might agree with Turkle's assessment of the way ritual windows shape the contemporary mind. The difference is that Bloom and D'Souza would consider that shaping deplorable, yet another baleful influence, like television or rap lyrics, seducing the youth of America. What all of these various positions agree on, though, is the underlying premise that windows lead inexorably to a more fragmented, disconnected experience of the world. I'm not totally convinced that this is a reasonable a priori assumption. There is no doubt that the transparent mode switches of a Windows-driven interface allow us to multitask more easily within our computers. Though most of the time our routines involve discrete sequences where we concentrate separately on one task after another rather than managing them all at once. Still, the on-screen space has grown more layered and multiplicitous, and of all the interface innovations, the window has played the most important role in making this possible. Turkle is right to point out that the more is happening on our screens, of course more is a relative term, which is why any account of the computer's newfound complexity must also acknowledge how dull and one-dimensional it once was. Multitasking is a digital age term, but the basic process of concentrating on several things at once is hardly a so valued invention. People have been multitasking for centuries, if not millennia, as anyone who has cared for an infant or done homework in front of the TV will testify. If anything, the digital computer has kept us abnormally focused on single tasks during the command line years. The rise of the window simply restored us to our usual fragmented state, the sort of multitasking we labor through every morning, reading the paper while getting dressed, all the while keeping an eye on the bacon and eggs on the stove. The window metaphor was a genuine liberation for most users, but what it liberated were innate skills that had long been suppressed by the awkward mode switches of the command line regime. The window did not create a new consciousness. It simply let us apply our existing consciousness to the information space on the screen. Not all the issues raised by the modern Windows-driven interface have to do with the postmodernistic sociology or our fragmented sense of the self. Some of the most intriguing and unexpected side effects of the Windows revolution turned out to be legal and ethical disputes revolving around journalistic principles and the intellectual property rights. But to understand those relationships, we first need to take a look at how the window has matured since those heady days at Xerox PARC and SRI.